All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and read chapter 2 of George Washington's Socks. Can we go home and get my blanket? Katie's voice came from inside the tent. The first meeting of the Adventure Club had just come to order. President Matthew Carlton had taken attendance, collected dues, 25 cents, or equal amounts of candy, and had ordered Katie to wait in the tent. Matt shook his head in disgust as he sat at the campfire with the other club members, Tony, Q, and Hooter. Go to sleep, Katie. We can't get your blanket now. It's too late, he called over the crackling campfire. Q handed Matt a thick green book. The words Adventures in History, Volume 4, were printed in large gold letters on the cover. Matt looked over to Tony and Hooter. Q and I did our history report together on George Washington, he told them. So if you have any questions, we can probably answer them since we did so much research. You only read one library book for that report, Tony objected. You can't call one book so much research. You didn't see the size of that book, Tony, Matt told him. It was big. I mean, really big. Look, Tony, we're not saying that we know everything about the Revolutionary War, but we did do a report on it, and we do know a lot more than you do, Q said smugly. Okay, guys, let's not waste any more time trying to decide who knows more about the Revolutionary War. Q got this book from his uncle, and none of us have read it yet. So be quiet and listen. Matt opened the book to the page that had a bookmark in it. The Crossing of the Delaware River and the War for Independence, he began. Between the autumn of 1775 and the autumn of 1776, the rebel army had suffered such great losses that many feared the American cause would soon be lost. I thought we won the war, Hooter interrupted. It sounds like we lost. We almost did lose it, Matt told him, looking up from the book. That's why this adventure is so incredible. Listen. Matt looked back down to the book and continued to read. As he made his way across New Jersey, General Washington was in desperate need of food and supplies for his ill-clad army. New Jersey was at this time a state divided in its loyalties. Many farmers felt they still owed their allegiance to the king in England and would not accept the new Confederate money that the Congress had issued to the army. British spies were everywhere. The rebels themselves were ill-trained and inexperienced soldiers, most of them having more experience with a plow than a bayonet. If these were not enough obstacles for General Washington, the winter of 1776 proved to be the hardest weather that the region had ever experienced. But, as discouraged as Washington was, he was not prepared to accept defeat, not yet. The American army was on the verge of collapse and in desperate need of a victory in order to turn the tide in their favor. The crossing of the Delaware was the taking of Trenton on December 26th. Proved to be just such a victory. Can you imagine what it must have been like? Matt said suddenly, looking up from the book. Cold, Q replied. Really, really cold. They crossed the river at night in the middle of rain and ice and snow. They must have been freezing. Just like we're going to be if we let this fire go out, Tony said as he got up to get another log for the fire. Matt put down the book and joined the other club members in carrying over a load of wood from the woodpile to the campfire. Tony's dad had helped them build the fire after they had set up the tent behind the garage. He had given them a long lecture on fire safety before he finally left them alone and went back to the house. Matt thought camping in Tony's yard was okay, but he wished they were a little more in the wild and dangerous. He wished it were a little more wild and dangerous. If Tony's father had let them make camp along the lake like they had wanted to do, it would have been perfect. As it was, Tony's parents kept coming out to the kitchen door and peeking out to check on them every 10 minutes. Sometimes they'd treat me like I was in second grade or something. Tony groaned, waving his mother away from the door. It's probably because you're so small, Q pointed out. Yeah, Tony, I've seen some second graders that are a whole lot bigger than you, Hooter added. Tony shrugged his shoulders. He was used to people pointing out his lack of height. He was the shortest boy in the 5th grade. It's just because of his size that Tony is such an important member of the club, Matt said with authority, sitting back down in front of the fire. It is? Tony squeaked, sitting beside him. Sure, since you're the smallest man, you'll be our scout. You can do all the tracking, traveling ahead of us to check things out without being seen. And since you're so small, you weigh less than any of us. Do you remember those Indian scouts in the Davy Crockett book we read? Remember how they could walk through the woods without making a sound? Well, you don't think they weighed 300 pounds, do you? No, I guess not, Tony grinned, throwing his shoulders back and sitting up straight like an Indian scout. Matt turned to Q. Q's name was Quentin, but everyone called him Q for short. Now, Q, you'll be the club's brain, Matt told him. Everyone here knows that you have the fastest brain in the 5th grade, maybe in the whole school. Except for Carla, Tony interrupted. Have you seen what Carla looks like lately? Hooter said with a grin. She had her hair permed or something, and it looks like a Brillo pad that's been microwaved. Not too smart. But then she's a girl. What do you expect? Matt shook his head. Now, Q, we're going to need some quick thinking if we get in some live or die situations. So be prepared to think. I know, Q said, taking off his glasses to wipe a mosquito from them. I already thought of that, and I have no intention of perming my hair. So what about me? Hooter interrupted. What's my job? Hooter's real name was Brian Merlos, but he didn't look anything like a Brian Merlos. To Matt, he had always looked like a young version of Fred Flintstone. He was big and kind of goofy looking, but he was a softie at heart. In the 3rd grade, he had found a baby owl with a broken wing. Sorry, my page is sticking. He had found an owl with a broken wing. He put it in a little box and carried it with him wherever he went, hooting softly to it all the while. His parents finally made him take the owl to an animal shelter, but by then he had done so much hooting that all the kids in the neighborhood had started calling him Hooter, and the name just stuck. Don't worry, Hooter. I've got a big job for you, Matt assured him. You'll be our strong man. Whenever we find ourselves in a situation that takes abnormal strength and more muscle than we can muster, we'll turn to you. And if you come across any stray baby animals, that will be your department. What do you think? Can you handle it? Piece of cake, Chief, Hooter grinned, flexing his muscles. Then he suddenly stopped and looked toward the tent. Matt and the rest of the boys followed Hooter's gaze. Everyone was quiet, listening to the little voice coming from the tent. What's my job, Chief? Everyone looked at Matt and grinned, but Matt frowned instead. Forget it, Katie, he scowled. No girls are allowed in the adventure club, he said firmly. The little voice answered, I'm not a girl, I'm a sister. No, Katie, what you are is a pain. Now be quiet and go to sleep. The only reply from the tent was some loud sniffling. Oh, Matt, have a heart. Hooter stood up and walked toward the tent. Why can't we make her a visiting member, just for tonight? Technically speaking, the club's charter dictates that no females are allowed in the club, visiting or otherwise, Q told him. Okay, but it's like Katie said, she's not just a girl, she's a relative. That should count for something, Hooter pointed out. None of you guys have a little sister, and believe me, you don't know what pains they can be, Matt tried to explain. I sort of know how she feels, Tony said. It's not much fun always being the littlest and the one that's always getting left out. Come on, Matt, just for tonight. She can't be that bad, Hooter laughed, opening the tent. Okay, Matt sighed, but don't say I didn't warn you. As Hooter held open the tent flap, the newest temporary member of the adventure club stumbled out. In the light of the campfire, her head was a blaze of red curls. Over her shoulder was a toy bow with the arrows in a pouch on her back. She held a water gun in one hand and a plastic heroic hero sword in the other. She took a step toward the group and shot Hooter in the nose with her squirt gun. I'm ready for an adventure, Chief, she said with a dimpled grin. That's the end of that chapter.